Hey guys, tonight we're starting with a sound so simple you probably take it for granted, your own voice bouncing back at you. Imagine trudging through a damp prehistoric cave, torch in hand, and calling out just to hear your words return, warped, delayed, and multiplied by stone walls. That's the very first sound experiment, though no one wrote it down. And you probably won't survive this echo-haunted cave, at least not without a shiver down your spine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing the little constellation of where you all are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step deeper into the flickering shadows, the walls slick with condensation, your own footsteps muffled by dust. When you call out just a simple "hey," the sound ricochets back, strangely distorted, like another version of you speaking from the stone. For early humans, this wasn't just neat acoustics, it was a brush with the supernatural. The first echoes may have been mistaken for spirits or gods answering back. Archaeologists still argue whether cave paintings were placed in the echo spots deliberately, meant to make the art come alive with sound. Imagine standing before a painted bison while its roar seems to growl back at you from the stone. It's immersive art before VR headsets were even a twinkle in the cosmos. As you shuffle through this cavern, you notice how some chambers seem alive. Clap your hands in one, and the air vibrates like a drum. In another, your voice disappears almost instantly, swallowed by porous limestone. The cave becomes not just a shelter, but a laboratory. The mainstream fact here, scientists have indeed studied places like the caves at Lascaux and Chauvet, where painted chambers match acoustically active spots. Coincidence? Well, historians still argue whether this proves ritual use, or whether ancient people simply liked echo-friendly hangouts. Now, here's the quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists suggest echoes may have birthed early ideas of the soul. If your words keep speaking after you've gone silent, maybe some invisible part of you exists beyond the body. Suddenly, acoustics turns metaphysical. You're no longer just making noise, you're touching eternity with a shout. Picture yourself crouched with a small band of hunters, torches flickering. One of them sings, low and steady, and the cave walls seem to hum back. It's soothing, hypnotic, maybe even calming enough to steady nerves before a dangerous hunt. Others might scream or chant louder, daring the spirits to respond. You're caught in a proto-concert, the world's first sound bath. Except instead of a yoga studio, you're crouched between stalagmites and hoping that saber-toothed tigers aren't waiting outside. And of course, as your stomach growls, yes, even ancient explorers had snack cravings. You realize these early sonic experiments weren't for entertainment alone. They were practice in controlling sound, learning that certain pitches travel farther, certain rhythms resonate longer, and some sounds stir emotions in unpredictable ways. The same principle that makes you cry at a sad violin note started here, in a wet cavern, with people banging rocks together. The air grows colder. You run your hand across the jagged wall and picture someone tens of thousands of years ago doing the same, then humming, then stopping in awe as the stone hums back. Was that magic? Was it science? They wouldn't have used those words, but they certainly felt the power. Imagine if you had no Netflix, no radio, no Spotify playlists. Echoes were your special effects, your Dolby surround system, your terrifying horror movie jump scare all rolled into one. Fast forward in your mind. You can almost see early storytellers using the cave's acoustics for drama. A hero's voice booming larger than life, a monster's growl echoing from hidden cracks, a god's whisper amplified until it felt divine. Historians still argue whether ritual songs tied to hunting or fertility were designed to maximize these acoustic effects. What we do know is that prehistoric humans weren't just painting on walls, they were performing, and the cave itself was their stage. It makes you chuckle, doesn't it? You imagine the first dad joke echo. Some Cro-Magnon guy calls out "Who's there?" into the void and laughs when the walls dutifully shout it back. Suddenly, you've got prehistoric comedy night, complete with groans from the clan and a child yelling louder just to compete. That human urge to play with sound, it's eternal. You wander further. The cave narrows and your voice changes. Instead of echoes, the walls absorb it, leaving silence so complete you can hear your heartbeat. And that's when you realize silence is as powerful as sound. In these black corridors, silence equals danger, no echo, no clue about space. Sound isn't just a trick, it's survival. The deeper you go, the more you sense a pattern, humans learning not only how sound behaves, but also how it shapes emotions, awe, fear, laughter, comfort. It all starts with how your voice bounces back to you. In many ways, this cave is humanity's first classroom, first concert hall, and first haunted house rolled into one. When you finally emerge into the starlit night, you carry more than torch smoke in your hair. You carry the first lesson of sound's strange power. Echoes aren't just empty reflections, they're invitations. They lure you to experiment, to listen more closely, to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the universe is speaking back. And in a way, isn't that what you're doing tonight? Listening to vibrations in the dark, wondering what hidden truths hum beneath the surface. You shuffle forward from the damp caves and emerge into a different kind of stage, an open savanna beneath the African sun. The ground is dry, the air shimmering with heat, and yet when you strike a rock with a stick, the sound isn't just a dull clack. It resonates. It sings. The earth itself seems to hold a drum within. This is where the story of lithophones, or stone drums, begins. In parts of Africa, certain boulders ring when struck, as though hollowed by hidden spirits. Early communities didn't just stumble upon this phenomenon by accident. They leaned into it, testing one rock after another until they had something like the first outdoor music festival, minus the overpriced tickets. Archaeologists have documented these singing stones across regions from southern Africa to Ethiopia, sometimes arranged in patterns suggesting deliberate use. Mainstream fact, some of these lithophones are still playable today, producing clear pitches when struck. Now, here's the quirky twist. These stones weren't always treated as mere instruments. In several traditions, they were sacred. The vibrations weren't just pleasing, they were portals to the unseen. Imagine a healer in a village ceremony, striking a massive resonant rock, its deep tone pulsing through the ground like a heartbeat. To the gathered crowd, that wasn't physics, it was power. You can almost feel the low rumble through your chest as you stand there, pretending not to flinch even though the sound feels alive. You glance around at villagers forming a circle, clapping in rhythm, voices rising. Someone keeps striking the stone, and its pulse becomes the anchor for the whole gathering. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were primarily religious, social, or proto-scientific experiments in vibration. Maybe all three. To a people without written language, what better way to record meaning than through rhythm carved into the air? You kneel beside one of these rocks, tapping gently. At first, the sound is faint. Then you find the sweet spot, and suddenly the stone hums like a bell. You grin. It's the Stone Age equivalent of stumbling on the perfect guitar chord, except instead of strings, you're coaxing music from granite that's been sitting in the dirt for millions of years. Not bad for an impromptu jam session. Picture the scene expanding, fires crackling nearby, kids stomping their feet, dancers moving in arcs around the stone. This isn't just sound, it's energy binding the group together. In a world without microphones or amplifiers, the earth itself becomes the speaker system. And if you're thinking, well, that beats my Bluetooth speaker cutting out every 5 minutes, you're not wrong. But there's another layer here. Sound in this form isn't just heard, it's felt. You press your palm against the rock as it rings, and the vibration travels up your arm. In many African traditions, that tactile element is what transforms a performance into healing. The belief was simple: if sound can shake a stone, maybe it can shake something loose inside the human body too. Sickness, sadness, even evil spirits. And honestly, who hasn't wished they could just whack a boulder to cure a headache? Let's pause for one of those light asides. Imagine explaining to a modern doctor, "Yeah, I got a migraine, but don't worry, I booked a stone drumming session." Instead of pills, you're prescribed a rhythmic rock concert. Side effects may include spontaneous dancing and an overwhelming urge to join the chorus. You stand back and notice something. Each stone seems to have its own voice. One rings bright and high, another deep and resonant. By arranging them side by side, early musicians created scales without even knowing the word for it. You're basically watching the world's first xylophone being invented, except much heavier, and with no roadies to lug it to the next gig. The scholarly debates here get spicier. Some researchers argue these lithophones influenced later instruments like drums and bells. Others say they were purely ritual, never intended for music in the entertainment sense. And then there's the fringe idea. Some claim certain stone circles may have been tuned to celestial events, the vibrations aligning with the rhythms of stars or seasons. It's speculative, yes, but fun to imagine villagers striking rocks in sync with moonlight, weaving cosmic patterns in sound. You let your eyes drift shut as the drumming intensifies. The rhythm is hypnotic, the ground vibrating beneath your bare feet. Your breathing slows until it syncs with the pulse. Suddenly, you understand why these ceremonies mattered. It isn't about melody, it's about entrainment. Your body becoming part of the rhythm, part of the group, part of the universe's endless beat. It makes you chuckle, because isn't that what happens in nightclubs today? People cram together, music so loud it rattles your bones, strangers moving in sync like they've known each other forever. Swap the neon lights for a fire pit, and you're back in the savannah, finding communion in sound. As dawn breaks, the stone drums fall silent, smoke curls from extinguished fires. The rocks, once alive, now seem ordinary again, just slabs of earth scattered across the land. But you know better. You've felt their heartbeat, you've heard their hidden voices, and you realize humans didn't just use sound to fill silence. They used it to make the world itself feel alive, to remind themselves they weren't alone in the vast, echoing night. You step away from the vibrating stones and find yourself staring at a structure that rises like a mountain shaped by human hands. A Mesopotamian ziggurat, its sun-baked bricks stacked into terraces that climb toward the sky. The air smells of dust and incense, and somewhere inside, a deep rhythmic chant reverberates, echoing off the baked clay. This is where sound stops being a playful echo or a drumming stone and becomes a deliberate bridge between humans and the divine. You walk into the shadowy temple chamber. The cool interior swallows the heat of the sun, but it amplifies something else. Voices. Priests chant in unison, syllables stretching like rope pulled taut. Each note lingers, bouncing off the walls, filling every corner of the sacred space. The mainstream fact: Mesopotamian priests did indeed use ritual chants, hymns, and laments as part of their ceremonies, often recorded on clay tablets. Some texts even prescribe exact tonal patterns, as if ancient engineers had already discovered that vibration could shape human mood. Here's the quirky bit. These chants weren't just pretty songs, they were technology. Some temples were designed with acoustics in mind. Archaeologists studying certain ziggurats and shrines have noted how thick walls and angled corridors shaped sound, amplifying voices until a small group of chanters could fill an entire complex. Imagine a handful of priests creating the auditory illusion of 1,000 voices, making worshippers shiver in awe. If you've ever stepped into a bathroom and suddenly sounded like Adele, you get the idea, but this was on a divine scale. You shuffle closer to the altar. clay tablets stacked nearby preserve hymns to gods like Enlil and Inanna. But when spoken aloud, those words transform. The syllables vibrate in your chest. Your breath syncs with the priest's, and suddenly you feel drawn into the collective hum. Historians still argue whether these chants were intended to hypnotize worshippers, connect with cosmic rhythms, or simply make the rituals more dramatic. Probably all three. After all, nothing sells a religion quite like a soundtrack. The priests here treat sound like a lever for reality. Chant the right syllable at the right pitch, and you're not just speaking, you're bending the cosmos. Some hymns were believed to summon rains, others to ward off sickness, others still to appease the gods of fertility or war. You can almost see farmers standing outside, ears pricked, waiting for the droning voices to ripple into the sky and pull down clouds. You lean against a column and notice something else. The rhythm isn't random, it's mathematical. Ancient Mesopotamians were obsessed with numbers, base 60, careful divisions, astronomical tables. It's not a stretch to imagine they applied the same precision to sound. This foreshadows what Pythagoras would later codify in Greece, that numbers and harmonies aren't just cousins, they're siblings, born of the same universal truth. But here, centuries earlier, people already sensed the link. And now comes the delightful aside. Imagine being a kid dragged to one of these ceremonies. You're fidgeting, whispering to your friend, and suddenly the priests hit a low, booming note that rattles your bones. You sit up straighter, partly in fear, partly because, wow, that was cool. Some things never change, whether it's ancient chants or bass drops at a concert. Kids still discover awe in the most inconvenient ways. The fringe theories swirl here too. Some researchers suggest Mesopotamian sound rituals were early experiments in what we'd now call acoustic therapy. A low drone could calm a restless crowd, while sharp, piercing tones might invoke fear or obedience. Did these priests know they were manipulating psychology, or did they simply stumble onto it and decide, yeah, this makes us sound godlike, let's keep doing it? Historians still argue whether these effects were intentional or happy accidents of architecture. You close your eyes and breathe with the chanting. It's slow, deliberate, more vibration than melody. The sound doesn't rise and fall so much as expand outward, filling the air like smoke. You realize that in a world without microphones, electricity, or even widespread literacy, sound was one of the few ways to command a crowd. Sound was power. The ceremony reaches a crescendo. Drums join in, low and steady, matching the heartbeat you feel in your chest. The floor seems to pulse under your feet. Worshippers kneel, faces pressed to the clay, overwhelmed not by sight, but by sound. And in this moment, you understand. The ziggurat is not just a building, it's an instrument. Its bricks and chambers shape vibrations into divine presence. As you slip back into the dusty courtyard, the chants still hum in your ears. The priests remain inside, voices echoing like a living engine. And you realize humanity has taken another step forward. No longer playing with echoes or banging stones. People now bend architecture itself to amplify sound, transforming vibration into a sacred technology. And honestly, if you had to choose between Netflix or a temple that makes your whole ribcage buzz with ancient cosmic chants, you'd at least think twice. You step from the dusty ziggurats into a land where the Nile flows like a slow heartbeat, its waters glinting under the sun. Temples rise along its banks, their columns etched with gods and pharaohs who look both stern and serene. This is Egypt, and here sound is not only ritual, it's medicine. The desert may parch throats, but in these temples, voices are instruments designed to heal body and soul. You wander into a sacred chamber, and the first thing you notice is the faint rattle of a sistrum, a metal rattle shaped like an ancient tuning fork. its small rods strung with jingling discs. A priestess holds it aloft, shaking it rhythmically. The sound is high, metallic, almost insect-like, and yet strangely soothing. Egyptians believed this wasn't mere noise. The mainstream fact: the sistrum was sacred to Hathor, goddess of joy, love, and motherhood, and its shimmering tone was thought to drive away evil spirits and refresh the soul. But here's the quirky twist. Some Egyptologists suggest the sistrum was more than symbolic. Its rattling vibrations may have had measurable effects on mood, producing calming or even trance-like states. You picture yourself lying on a reed mat, temple walls painted with lotus blossoms, while a priestess shakes the instrument above you like some ancient sound therapist. Forget your white noise machine. This is 4,000 years older, and frankly, way more stylish. You lie still, and chants begin to rise. Priests surround the chamber, their voices low, droning in unison. The air seems to thicken. Your ribcage vibrates with each note. The sound bed you're lying on begins to hum, not metaphorically, but literally. According to some fringe theories, Egyptian healers may have used hollow wooden platforms that resonated when chants and instruments were played around them. Historians still argue whether this was real medical practice or simply ritual theatre, but the idea of patients being bathed in vibration has persisted all the way to modern sound therapy. Now, pause for a little modern chuckle. Imagine checking into your local clinic, and instead of a stethoscope, the doctor whips out a sistrum and says, "Okay, relax. I'll rattle this by your ears until your anxiety clears." You'd probably laugh, and then feel oddly better when the metallic shimmer starts to hypnotize you. Ancient hacks don't always sound so crazy after all. Back in the temple, the ceremony builds. Drums thud like heartbeats, flutes wail with sharp, breathy notes. The chants weave between them, words dedicated to gods like Thoth, Isis, or Horus. Each deity has specific hymns, their syllables chosen not just for meaning but for resonance. Egyptians believed the right sound could summon divine favour or realign a sick person's energy. Think of it as the original holistic medicine. No pills, just frequencies. One particularly fascinating practice was the recitation of Heka, spells spoken aloud. These weren't muttered incantations in a witch's hut. They were structured, tonal, often musical, intended to vibrate into existence. A healing spell for a snake bite, for example, wasn't just about the words. It was about how those words carried through the air, wrapping around the wound like a sonic bandage. You imagine a bitten villager sitting nervously while priests chant over him, half skeptical, half hoping the sound really does banish venom. Historians still argue whether these practices had placebo-like effects or were purely ceremonial. But either way, they reveal a deep intuition that words spoken aloud have power that words on clay cannot match. And let's not forget the architecture. You stroll deeper into the temple, and the echoes are uncanny. Columns rise like a forest of stone, but instead of scattering sound, they seem to focus it. Archaeologists have noted how some Egyptian temples were constructed with resonant chambers, rooms where even a whisper could swell into a roar. Imagine lying there, feverish, and hearing a priest's chant magnified into something otherworldly. You might believe healing energy had truly arrived, simply because the acoustics told your body so. Another quirky tidbit. Some researchers speculate Egyptians experimented with sound frequencies to heal bones. There's no direct evidence, but a few curious findings suggest tuning forks, or tuning fork-like instruments, may have been used in certain treatments. Even if that's fringe, it's fun to imagine a healer tapping a fork, holding it to your arm and saying, "Don't move, I'm aligning your skeleton with cosmic harmony." Honestly, it's the kind of pitch you'd hear in a modern wellness retreat. You close your eyes, letting the sounds wash over you, the hiss of the sistrum, the steady drumbeat, the low chant that makes your stomach flutter. Suddenly, you realize you've slipped into a trance. Your mind drifts, your breathing slows, and for a moment you forget you're supposed to be a skeptical observer. You're a patient now, suspended between earth and divinity, caught in the strange experiment of sound as medicine. When the ritual ends, silence crashes down like a wave. The priestess lowers her sistrum, the chanting fades. The air feels lighter, as though the temple has exhaled. Whether or not your imaginary fever is cured, you feel different, calmer, steadier, oddly more alive. And maybe that's the point. Maybe healing was never about measurable outcomes alone, but about reshaping perception through vibration. As you step back into the glaring Egyptian sun, you can't help but smile. You've just experienced a sound bar thousands of years before anyone thought to sell tickets for one in a yoga studio. And the Nile rolls on, carrying echoes of chants and rattles across centuries, whispering that sound has always been more than just noise. It's been a lifeline. You leave the Nile's glimmering banks and step into the marble-bright imagination of ancient Greece, where sound isn't just ritual or healing, it's the fabric of the cosmos itself. The air smells of olive groves and chalk dust, and somewhere in the distance a lyre twangs, delicate as sunlight. Tonight, you're not following priests, you're shadowing Pythagoras, the man who looked at strings and saw the universe. Picture him, robed and solemn, plucking at a monochord, a single string stretched over a wooden box. He places a bridge at the halfway point and suddenly the pitch jumps higher. Move it again, and the tone shifts. That's the mainstream fact. Pythagoras discovered that dividing a string at simple numerical ratios produces harmonious intervals. Halve it for the octave, 2/3 for the fifth, 3/4 for the fourth. To him, this wasn't just music, it was mathematics revealed through sound. Now here's the quirky twist. Pythagoras took it way beyond party tricks. He believed the entire cosmos was structured by the same ratios, that planets and stars themselves moved in silent harmonies, the so-called music of the spheres. You imagine looking up at the night sky, half expecting to hear Saturn humming in B-flat while Jupiter lays down a bass line. Historians still argue whether Pythagoras really believed this was audible, or if it was metaphorical. But either way, the idea is strangely comforting. The universe isn't chaos, it's a song, and you're a note in its melody. You settle onto a stone bench as Pythagoras' students gather, each wide-eyed as he explains that the soul itself can be tuned like a string. If anger rattles too loudly, calm it with harmony. If sadness drones too low, balance it with joy. This wasn't abstract philosophy. It was life advice, packaged in music theory. And you can almost hear him scolding. Yes, even your mood swings have bad pitch. Imagine being one of those students. You thought you signed up for geometry lessons, and suddenly your teacher's telling you to hum in the right frequency to align with Jupiter's orbit. You'd either roll your eyes or write it all down like gospel. And, funny enough, much of Western philosophy did exactly that. Pythagoras wasn't alone in this obsession. The Greeks built amphitheatres designed to carry a whisper across thousands of seats. You climb the stone steps of Epidaurus, a theatre so acoustically perfect that even today, if you drop a coin at centre stage, listeners at the top can hear it. That's not fringe, it's engineering genius. The semicircular shape, the limestone seats, even the spacing, all work together to amplify without modern tech. Imagine being an actor with no microphone and still managing to reach the very back row. You'd feel like a rock star centuries before electricity. And speaking of stars, Pythagoras' cosmic harmony theory bled into medicine, architecture, even politics. A well-tuned city, he claimed, was like a well-tuned instrument. Too much dissonance, chaos, too much uniformity, stagnation. Balance was key. Historians still argue whether this philosophy tangibly shaped Greek governance, or whether it was just poetic flourish. But when you hear politicians today talk about harmony in society, you're hearing echoes of Pythagoras strumming his monochord. Now let's toss in a light modern aside. Imagine Pythagoras walking into your Spotify playlist and rating it like a math test. Ah, yes, these trap beats, out of ratio, cosmic dissonance. Your soul is doomed. Meanwhile, you just wanted background noise while doing dishes. Sometimes philosophy ages with grace. Sometimes it feels like your dad lecturing you about real music. Still, the Greeks weren't just philosophizing. They experimented. They tested how pitch could influence emotions, how rhythm could motivate armies or soothe crowds. Think of a hoplite march. Shields clashing in time, flutes piping, chants rising. That's not just morale, it's sonic engineering. By aligning soldiers' footsteps with rhythm, they created unity, turning a scattered crowd into a single organism. The battlefield became another stage, and war another strange experiment in sound. And then there were the Orphics, mystical followers of Orpheus, who claimed music could purify the soul and even influence the afterlife. Their hymns weren't just about pleasing the gods, they were cheat codes for eternity. You picture someone nervously chanting in the dark, half prayer, half melody, hoping they'd show up in the afterlife tuned to the right frequency. You stand again in the amphitheatre, now empty, your footsteps echoing faintly. You clap once, and the sound travels upward, spiralling into the night. It's not just your clap, it's proof of geometry, philosophy, spirituality, all converging in one echo. And in that moment, you understand why the Greeks saw sound as sacred math. To them, listening was studying the architecture of the cosmos itself. You walk away beneath the stars, half wondering if you can hear their silent music. Maybe it's not audible, not in the way you hear drums or lyres. Maybe it's in the rhythm of your heartbeat, the pace of your steps, the quiet hum of thought. And suddenly, you feel like you're not just strolling through history, you're part of a harmony that began long before you and will keep playing long after. You drift onward into the chambers of classical Greece, where sound becomes more than entertainment, more than speech, more than mathematical abstraction. It becomes philosophy made audible. Tonight you wander cobblestone courtyards under crisp attic stars, the air still carrying the echoes of Socrates' laughter and the dry scratch of Aristotle's stylus on wax tablets. You slip between the white columns of the academy, where Plato, wide-eyed with grand metaphors, insists that music and cosmic order are inseparable. To him, the lyre's plucked string mirrors the structure of the universe itself, an audible reflection of celestial architecture. You don't exactly hear planets strumming, but you nod politely, because no one likes to interrupt Plato mid-monologue. Greek thinkers like Pythagoras had already laid the groundwork. Remember him from earlier, fussing over monochords and dividing strings into tidy ratios. Well, by this point, his students had spread across the Mediterranean, whispering about the music of the spheres. They believed the planets glided through space, producing harmonious vibrations, too subtle for mortal ears. Historians still argue whether Pythagoras literally thought the cosmos was a giant harp, or if he just liked a good metaphor. But the idea was sticky. It seeped into Plato's philosophy, shaping his insistence that civic virtue depended on musical training. Apparently, if you couldn't clap on beat, you probably shouldn't govern Athens. Your feet pad across mosaic floors into Aristotle's Lyceum, where the mood is more grounded. Aristotle, bless him, doesn't buy all this cosmic lyre business. He treats sound as a physical phenomenon, air compressed and expanded in waves. He describes voices, echoes, even the strange carrying power of shouting across valleys. Imagine him leaning back, muttering, "Look, Plato, music is lovely, but let's not pretend Jupiter is auditioning for the local choir." The man preferred practical acoustics over mystical harmonies. And then there's the theatre. You sit down on a worn stone bench in Epidaurus, an amphitheatre so precisely engineered that a dropped coin at the stage can be heard in the cheap seats. Tourists still test this today. leaning forward with delight when whispers travel across 14,000 spectators. The Greeks didn't just theorize, they built sound into civic life, designing vast stages where tragedies unfolded with perfect audibility. No microphones, no speakers, just geometry, patience, and the conviction that audiences needed to hear every wail of Oedipus in full clarity. Of course, quirks sneak in. Ancient accounts suggest that flute players were occasionally banned from certain rituals because their shrill tones were thought to corrupt the mood. Picture a solemn ceremony suddenly derailed by one overeager flautist blasting an improvised solo. And in Sparta, because of course Sparta, musical education was less about refinement and more about training for war. Soldiers marched to the steady beat of flutes and pipes, not because they enjoyed avant-garde concerts, but because synchronized footsteps terrified enemies. Imagine trying to fight a phalanx moving like a single drum line. Intimidating, and honestly a bit stylish. As you sink deeper into this Grecian soundscape, you notice how music here shapes identity, politics, and belief. To Plato, harmony cultivates virtue. To Aristotle, sound explains the natural world. To theatre architects, acoustics prove that art and engineering dance together. And to Spartan drill sergeants, rhythm makes you terrifyingly punctual in battle. Modern scholars still debate how literally the Greeks believed in the music of the spheres. Was it an actual soundtrack to existence, or a poetic device meant to nudge students toward abstract thought? Either way, the image persists, a whisper that perhaps the universe hums along to a melody we just can't quite hear. As your head leans back against the cool stone of the amphitheatre, the night air buzzing with imagined echoes, you wonder, if the cosmos is indeed a symphony, are you tuned to the right key, or are you, like most of us, just hoping the conductor doesn't notice you humming along out of rhythm? Either way, you stay, letting Greek voices drift into the stars above. Your path winds forward into the echoing marble halls of Rome, where practicality smothers mysticism and sound is treated less like divine song and more like an engineering problem. If Greece gave the world philosophy of sound, Rome gave the world the logistics of it. Tonight you wander through aqueducts, colosseums, and military camps, listening not just to the music of lyres and horns, but to the way Romans weaponized acoustics for control, spectacle, and empire. The first stop is, of course, the Colosseum. You sit high in the stone tiers, gazing down at the elliptical stage below. Here, 50,000 spectators once gathered, their voices rising like thunder, blending into a single wall of sound that could shake the bones. The roar of the crowd became a weapon, cheers or jeers loud enough to sway the fates of gladiators. Historians suggest the design wasn't just about sightlines, but also about sound flow. The oval shape created waves of applause that cascaded around the arena like a living storm. You can almost hear it now, the rhythmic chanting of Maximus, Maximus echoing against travertine walls. The Colosseum was Rome's greatest speaker system, amplifying both triumph and terror. And then there were theatres, borrowed from Greece but Romanized with extra flair. They built semicircular auditoriums with perfect acoustics, allowing actors to project without straining. Some even had retractable awnings, the velarium, which did more than block sun. It altered sound, creating a canvas that reflected voices downward. You imagine senators reclining, fanning themselves lazily, able to hear every syllable of a tragic verse while sipping watered wine. For Rome, acoustics were luxury as much as art. Yet sound wasn't limited to theatres and arenas. In military life, it was lifeblood. Trumpets, horns, and curved instruments called cornu directed entire legions. A single blast could command thousands to advance, retreat, or shift formation. Picture a dusty battlefield in Gaul, sunlight flashing off armour, and amid the chaos, clarion notes slicing the air with orders sharper than words. Soldiers drilled to these calls until instinct responded before thought. For Rome, sound meant coordination, survival, empire. Even politics bent to acoustics. You drift into the Senate, its marble walls carrying speeches to every corner. Cicero's orations still hang ghost-like in the air, his voice sharpened by architecture designed for persuasion. A weak speaker could lose not just an argument but a career, drowned beneath heckles amplified by stone. In this world, to speak well was to rule well. Of course, quirks and oddities persist. Ancient sources claim that Roman bathhouses weren't just for hygiene but also for entertainment, acoustic entertainment. The vaulted ceilings created booming echoes that made even modest humming sound like operatic performances. One poet mocked bathhouse goers for breaking into song purely to hear their voices magnified. You smile, picturing burly soldiers splashing in warm pools, competing in impromptu singing contests under domed roofs. And then there was the curious fascination with echo itself. Pliny the Elder catalogued strange places where sound seemed to bend, repeat, or disappear. To him, echoes were both a natural wonder and a puzzle of physics. Romans even built gardens where visitors could test their voices, chasing their own words bouncing off walls. Imagine noble women in silken stolas giggling as their whispered secrets ricocheted back at them, multiplied and distorted. Rome, unlike Greece, rarely pondered whether the universe hummed in celestial harmony. Instead, Romans asked, how can sound be bent, shaped, and controlled to build power? Their genius lay not in dreaming about the cosmos, but in designing amphitheatres, horns, and baths that made sound serve human needs. The result was an empire where voices carried, whether in political speeches, military commands, or the cheers of a bloodthirsty crowd. As you step outside into the forum, the stones beneath your feet seem to hold centuries of voices, packed tight in invisible layers, senators, generals, emperors, all leaving vibrations that once shook hearts. You pause and listen carefully, wondering, does sound ever truly die, or does it linger, a ghostly imprint woven into walls and soil? If so, Rome may still be murmuring to itself tonight. The stars fade as dawn nears. You take a breath, the chill air carrying echoes of the horns, chants, and speeches that once ruled half the world. Rome may be gone, but its acoustics, its mastery of voices, crowds, and echoes still reverberates through history. You step now into a new chapter, where the Middle Ages gather around you like a hooded cloak. The grandeur of Rome has crumbled into ruins, its amphitheatres overgrown with ivy, and the bustling acoustics of empire give way to quieter, more intimate soundscapes. Yet the medieval world was anything but silent. Tonight you walk through castles, cathedrals, and market squares, where sound was both sacred and practical, guiding daily life and echoing faith across centuries. The first thing you hear is bells, heavy, resonant, and commanding. Church bells governed medieval time as reliably as any clock. They summoned monks to prayer, marked hours for labourers, and warned of danger. You picture yourself in a village before sunrise. A distant toll rolls across fields, waking farmers and calling townsfolk to matins. Bells were more than signals. They were voices of God made iron and bronze. To live in the Middle Ages was to live within the rhythm of bells. Cathedrals, however, were the crown of medieval acoustics. You step into one now, Chartres or Notre Dame. It hardly matters. High vaults soar above, and your footsteps ring hollow against stone. Gregorian chants drift from the choir, voices layered in slow, resonant harmony. Unlike Roman theatres, these spaces were designed not for spectacle but for transcendence. The sound doesn't vanish, it lingers, wrapping you in waves of echo until human voices feel angelic. In these sacred halls, acoustics were not mere architecture but theology. proof that sound could carry you closer to the divine. But faith was not the only sound of the Middle Ages. You leave the cathedral and step into a bustling market square. The clang of blacksmiths, the clatter of hooves, hawkers shouting prices, children laughing, pigs squealing, all competing in a symphony of daily life. Town criers, the medieval newscasters, lift their voices above the din, proclaiming royal decrees or local gossip. In a world without printing presses, sound was the medium of truth. If you wished to know what happened in the wider world, you listened. Yet music, too, thrived in secular life. You follow a troupe of wandering minstrels strumming lutes, singing of knights, battles, and lost loves. Their voices carry through taverns, across castle courtyards, even into the chambers of lords and ladies. Unlike the formal chants of cathedrals, their music is lively, filled with rhythm and story. People gathered to listen, because to hear a song was to remember a tale. Long before books became common, sound was memory. Sound also had a darker side in the medieval imagination. Superstitions whispered that echoes could be voices of spirits, that howling winds carried omens, that silence itself could signal divine wrath. Imagine a storm battering a castle keep, the whistle of wind through arrow slits, the boom of thunder rattling stone, peasants crossing themselves in fear. To medieval ears, nature was alive with warning cries. And then there was warfare. Trumpets and drums again commanded armies, though now with more chaos than Roman precision, the clash of swords, the pounding of siege engines, and the war cries of knights created a brutal wall of sound meant to terrify as much as to kill. Chroniclers often described battles not in sights but in noise, the ringing of steel, the screams of men, the neighing of terrified horses. War was a storm of sound designed to break courage. Back within cloisters, monks pursued another kind of sound, silence. Unlike the roaring forums of Rome, monastic life prized the absence of speech. Some orders observed vows of near-total quiet, communicating with gestures and relying on bells or chants instead of chatter. Silence itself became holy, a soundless hymn to God. You can almost feel it now. Stone halls where every cough echoes, where the rustle of parchment sounds loud as thunder. In this quiet, thought becomes music. By the late Middle Ages, fascination with sound took curious forms. Scholars puzzled over echoes, resonance, and the healing powers of music. Physicians prescribed songs to ease melancholy. Alchemists whispered of hidden harmonies in metals and stones. The science of acoustics had not yet returned, but the seeds were there, buried in monasteries and whispered in courts, waiting for rediscovery. As the medieval night fades, you stand outside a cathedral. The last notes of chant drift into silence, and the toll of a bell marks dawn. Around you, peasants stir, merchants prepare their stalls, and roosters crow in chorus. The Middle Ages may have been an age of darkness to some, but in sound it was full of light. Bells, chants, cries, songs, and silences, each carried meaning, each bound people to one another and to their God. You close your eyes, and the sounds dissolve into memory. The world grows hushed, and only your breath remains. You sense that the story of sound is not over. Ahead lies rebirth, rediscovery, and the dawn of science itself. You awaken now in the Renaissance, where the air hums with rediscovery. The age is not only about art and exploration, but about the rebirth of ideas long buried in medieval cloisters. Sound itself becomes an object of curiosity once more. Tonight, you drift through palaces, theatres, and studies where thinkers, musicians, and engineers listen more carefully than ever before. The Renaissance ear was tuned to harmony. Music rose to new heights, carried by composers who transformed sound into architecture. You find yourself in Florence, perhaps within the Medici court, A chamber ensemble begins to play, viols, lutes, and voices interwoven in polyphony. Unlike the single lines of Gregorian chant, Renaissance music is layered, voices entering one after another until the air is filled with complex tapestry. For the first time, harmony feels intentional, constructed with mathematical precision. Musicians study ratios, intervals, and scales, believing that beauty emerges from order, just as the cosmos itself was said to be structured by the music of the spheres. This was no mere metaphor. Renaissance philosophers revived ancient Greek ideas that the planets moved in silent harmony, their orbits resonating in a cosmic scale inaudible to the human ear. To contemplate sound was to contemplate the universe. You see scholars in dim-lit studies, copying diagrams of strings and monochords, seeking to map music onto mathematics and mathematics onto nature itself. The Renaissance was an age where numbers sang. Beyond philosophy, acoustics entered architecture. Imagine stepping into a new opera house, the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza, or early stages in Venice. Unlike medieval cathedrals, which created sound by accident, these theatres were designed with performance in mind. Architects asked, how should sound carry? Where should voices reach? Acoustics was becoming deliberate. Every curved ceiling, every wooden panel, was tested to amplify music and speech. And then there were the inventions. The printing press, born in the 15th century, transformed how sound was transmitted, not directly through ears, but through music notation. For the first time, scores could be copied and shared widely, allowing songs to spread beyond courts and monasteries. Music was no longer fleeting, trapped in the moment of performance. It became permanent, recorded in ink. You walk into a shop in Venice and see printed sheet music for sale, a marvel to those who had once relied only on memory or manuscript. Sound now travelled by page. Instruments themselves grew in variety and sophistication. The viol family blossomed. Harpsichords filled salons with bright metallic notes, and organs shook cathedrals with thunderous force. Each instrument demanded new spaces, new ways of hearing. Even the human voice was reshaped, as polyphonic choirs sought balance between individual and collective. Renaissance sound was not just louder, it was more intricate, more intellectual. But the Renaissance was also an age of wonder and curiosity about the natural world. Scientists began asking questions not merely about harmony, but about the mechanics of sound itself. How does air carry vibration? Why do strings of different lengths produce different notes? You glimpse Leonardo da Vinci sketching instruments, noting the behaviour of echoes in chambers and pondering how sound waves ripple like water. Though the full theory of acoustics was not yet written, the seeds were sprouting. Sound also played a role in exploration. As ships sailed across oceans, sailors relied on the cries of gulls, the crash of waves against unseen shores, even the creak of rigging in storm winds. Sound became a companion to voyages, both warning and comfort. Imagine Columbus, or Magellan, standing at the rail, listening for signals in the vast silence of sea. The Renaissance expanded not only the map of the world, but also the awareness of sound within it. In city streets, noise grew as well. Markets bustled with new vigour. Gunpowder introduced the thunder of cannons, and celebrations exploded with fireworks, sights that were also sounds. Urban Europe was alive with shouts, songs, and inventions. The human ear was constantly engaged, constantly tested. At the same time, silence gained new value. Scholars, poets, and mystics spoke of stillness as the necessary counterpart to music, the blank canvas on which notes could shine. Libraries, monasteries, and studies preserved spaces of quiet contemplation even as theatres and plazas roared with new energy. The Renaissance was a paradox. Never before had sound been so celebrated, and yet silence never more prized. As you walk away from a Venetian theatre, the last echoes of a madrigal fading, You realise the Renaissance marked a shift in human listening. Sound was no longer only sacred or functional, it was aesthetic, intellectual, and scientific. Bells still tolled, markets still roared, but above them rose a new awareness. Sound was not just something heard, but something studied, designed, and shared. The night grows still, the Medici court vanishes, the chants dissolve, the lutes are set aside. Ahead lies the thunder of revolutions, both scientific and industrial. The world is about to grow noisier still. The Renaissance recedes, and you find yourself stepping into the Age of Enlightenment. The 17th and 18th centuries glimmer with a new kind of curiosity, one rooted not in mysticism or mere harmony, but in the pursuit of reason, experiment, and natural law. For sound. This was a turning point. The Enlightenment transformed sound from art into science, from mystery into measurable phenomenon. You drift through a candlelit study in London, where Robert Boyle adjusts a curious device, an air pump. He demonstrates to an audience that a ringing bell, when placed under a glass dome and deprived of air, slowly grows silent. The conclusion is undeniable. Sound requires a medium. Without air, vibrations cannot travel. This simple experiment revolutionizes understanding, showing that sound is not some ethereal essence, but a physical process. Soon, others build upon this foundation. Isaac Newton, in his Principia Mathematica, calculates the speed of sound in air, linking it to density and elasticity. Though his numbers were imperfect, the attempt marked a profound shift. Sound was no longer only a sensation, it was a subject for equations, a law of nature like gravity. You imagine chalk marks on blackboards, scholars deriving formulas, the once ineffable qualities of music and speech reduced, yet elevated by numbers. Acoustics becomes a discipline of its own. Joseph Sauveur, a French scientist, coins the very term acoustique in the early 1700s. He studies harmonics, frequencies, and resonance, paving the way for a vocabulary we still use today. For the first time, humans begin to map sound systematically, how vibrations travel, how waves behave, how instruments resonate. You can almost hear the hum of tuning forks being struck, their vibrations steady, reliable, measurable. The Enlightenment also transforms the spaces where sound is heard. Opera houses bloom across Europe, grander and more refined than their Renaissance forerunners. In Paris and Vienna, architects design not only for spectacle, but for acoustics. Balconies arrange for clarity. Domes curve to carry every note. No longer mere trial and error. These designs are influenced by a growing awareness of how sound waves bounce and blend. Sitting in the audience, you hear voices soar effortlessly above orchestras, the product of both art and science. At the same time, music itself is expanding. Baroque and classical composers, Bach, Handel, Mozart, stretch the possibilities of harmony, instrumentation, and dynamics. Their works demand precision not only from performers, but from listeners. Each note, each chord, is deliberate, mathematical, almost architectural in its structure. In this, you hear echoes of Enlightenment ideals, balance, clarity, proportion. Outside the concert hall, Enlightenment curiosity reshapes other aspects of sound. Inventors begin to capture it, measure it, and even imagine reproducing it. The tuning fork, invented by John Shaw in 1711, becomes a symbol of precision, providing a reliable pitch for science and music alike. The very concept of frequency, how many vibrations occur in a second, takes shape, though the exact tools to measure it are still crude. Philosophers too reflect on sound. John Locke describes it as a secondary quality, something existing not in the object itself but in the perception of the listener, created when vibrations strike the ear. To hear, then, is not only physics but psychology. The Enlightenment insists that the mind and senses can be studied, quantified, understood. You drift past salons in Paris, where thinkers debate not only politics and rights, but also how perception shapes reality. Sound, once divine mystery, becomes evidence in larger arguments about knowledge itself. Yet, as always, sound remains entwined with society. The Enlightenment was an age of revolutions, and sound played its part. Pamphlets spread ideas, but so did voices, street orators calling for liberty, drums summoning militias, and cannons thundering across battlefields. The French Revolution was not only read but heard, crowds shouting in unison, bells ringing the call to gather, songs of rebellion echoing in the streets. Sound became a weapon as much as a symbol. Even the American Revolution carried its soundtrack. The crack of muskets, the roll of fife and drum corps, the ringing proclamations in town squares. Sound gave movements power, binding individuals into collective action. You can almost hear the overlapping noises, reason and revolt, philosophy and passion, filling Enlightenment cities with a restless energy. And yet, the Enlightenment also cherished quiet. In the age of salons, quiet listening became a mark of refinement. Audiences, once rowdy in Renaissance performances, now sat in disciplined silence at concerts, training their ears to appreciate subtleties. The act of listening itself transformed, becoming active, attentive, even intellectual. To listen was no longer passive, it was participation in the progress of reason. As you leave the candlelit chamber, the bell jar and tuning fork fade. Ahead lies the next great upheaval, one that will shake the world and fill it with noise as never before, the Industrial Revolution. You drift now into the dawn of the 19th century, where smokestacks rise above cities and the rhythmic pounding of machinery fills the air. The Industrial Revolution has arrived, and with it, sound itself changes forever. Once a companion of nature and human voice, sound now becomes mechanical, metallic, and relentless. Imagine yourself in Manchester or Birmingham, walking through narrow streets where textile mills thunder day and night. The clatter of looms, the hiss of steam engines, the hammering of metalworks. This new soundscape is ceaseless, inescapable. Workers shout over the din. Children grow up with ears filled by machinery, and silence itself becomes rare. For the first time in history, whole populations live inside a man-made roar. The Industrial Revolution does not simply create noise, it transforms how humans think about sound. Engineers begin to treat it as both a problem and a possibility. Factories are redesigned to reduce damaging echoes. In cities, bells no longer dominate the soundscape. Whistles and horns regulate life. A factory whistle marks the start of a shift. A railway whistle warns of an approaching train. Time itself is measured by sound, not only by clocks. Railways, in particular, reshape hearing. You stand by the tracks as iron locomotives thunder past, the shriek of metal on metal rattling your bones. The world is suddenly faster, louder, more dangerous. Towns once hushed at night now echo with whistles and clattering carriages. The sound of progress is not gentle, it is overwhelming, awe-inspiring, and sometimes terrifying. But amid the din of industry, the science of acoustics advances rapidly. Hermann von Helmholtz, in the mid-19th century, conducts experiments with resonance and vibration. His great work, On the Sensations of Tone, connects physics with physiology, showing how the ear translates vibrations into perception. He even builds resonators, glass spheres that isolate specific frequencies, allowing him to study sound with a precision unimaginable to earlier generations. For Helmholtz, sound becomes not only a wave in the air, but a process inside the body, a dialogue between world and mind. Another revolution unfolds in parallel, the birth of sound recording. In 1857, Edward Léon Scott de Martinville invents the phonautograph, a machine that traces sound vibrations onto soot-blackened paper. It cannot play them back, but it proves sound can be captured outside the ear. 2 decades later, Thomas Edison creates the phonograph, and suddenly the human voice can outlive the human body. Imagine listening as Edison first turns the crank, and a faint, ghostly voice recites, "Mary had a little lamb." The crowd gasps. Sound, once fleeting, is now eternal. The phonograph changes everything. Music, speeches, and voices can now travel without the performer. Culture no longer requires presence. It can be stored, replayed, commodified. The very idea of memory expands, as if time itself has acquired an echo. You can almost hear parlours across Europe and America filling with laughter and amazement as families gather around this strange talking machine. At the same time, telecommunication reshapes the role of sound in society. Samuel Morse's telegraph reduces communication to clicks, but Alexander Graham Bell's telephone restores the human voice, carrying it across wires. For the first time, people can converse at a distance, collapsing geography into immediacy. To hear a loved one's voice from hundreds of miles away is nothing short of miraculous. The intimacy of sound conquers space itself, but the Industrial Revolution also awakens awareness of sound's dangers. Doctors begin to recognize hearing loss among factory workers, soldiers, and railway men. Noise becomes a hazard of modernity, an invisible injury inflicted by progress. New words enter the vocabulary: noise pollution, industrial deafness. The same forces that gave humanity new powers also demanded new protections. Culturally, the 19th century remains a golden age of music. Concert halls grow grander, orchestras larger. Beethoven, composing while losing his hearing, proves that music is more than sound. It is structure, imagination, inner vibration. His symphonies, louder and more dramatic than those of his predecessors, mirror the thundering energy of the industrial world. Liszt and Wagner follow, filling opera houses with overwhelming force. Music becomes not just entertainment, but spectacle, capable of overpowering listeners much like the machines outside. Urban soundscapes also shift. In the streets, vendors still cry their wares, but now their voices mingle with the clip-clop of horses, the clang of trams, the grinding gears of factories. Cities become polyphonic, a collage of human, animal, and machine. Silence retreats to the countryside, and even there, the rumble of distant trains invades. By the late 19th century, the idea of sound as vibration is well established. Scientists measure the speed of sound with precision, study ultrasound, and even explore sonar, using echoes to navigate underwater. For the first time, humanity begins to use sound not only to hear, but to probe the invisible, mapping space, depth, and distance with echoes. The Industrial Revolution, then, is both a triumph and a warning. It reveals sound's power to shape daily life, to connect, to preserve, to overwhelm. You leave this century hearing the echoes of factories, the hiss of steam, the scratch of phonograph needles, the first telephone rings. Ahead, you sense a world where sound will no longer simply be experienced. It will be broadcast, electrified, global. You lean in close, ears prickling as the thought experiment takes form. What if sound could heal, not just soothe or calm, but literally knit together broken bodies and restore failing organs? It sounds like an outlandish promise from a late-night infomercial, the kind where someone tries to sell you a vibrating crystal wand guaranteed to fix your bad knee. But ancient texts suggest that across the world, from the banks of the Nile to the mountains of Tibet, people toyed with the idea that sound itself might be medicine. And if you've ever noticed your mood lift when your favourite song comes on, you already know they weren't completely off base. The Egyptians, meticulous as always, recorded that temples were not just places of worship but also chambers of healing. Some ruins carry acoustic signatures that modern researchers describe as uncanny. You step into one chamber and clap your hands. The echo folds back on itself, pressing against your chest in a way that feels less like sound and more like a massage. Archaeologists argue whether this was intentional design or just a happy accident of stonework, but the records speak of vibrations of the gods flowing through the ill. Imagine being led into one of those chambers with a fever, lying on cool stone while priests chant in low voices, their rhythms blending with the resonance of the walls until you feel your body pulsing in sympathy. It's not antibiotics, but it might have felt like a cure. Historians still argue whether Tibetan singing bowls were originally made for healing or for ritual, but modern experiments show the vibrations can actually stimulate changes in the body. When you strike the bowl and trace its rim, the hum thickens the air, sending a gentle buzz through your bones if you hold it close. Some claim the frequencies improve circulation or even alter brainwave states, though skeptics point out that a lot of this evidence comes from wellness blogs, not peer-reviewed journals. Still, sit in a quiet room with one of those bowls and you'll notice something undeniable. Your breathing slows, your thoughts untangle, and you feel a little less like a human stress ball. In ancient Greece, doctors loyal to Hippocrates played lyres and flutes beside patients. They didn't have x-rays or ibuprofen, but they noticed certain scales seemed to calm anxiety or ease sleeplessness. Pythagoras, always dramatic, suggested that illness was nothing more than disharmony in the body's internal music. Get the tune right again, he believed, and the body would slip back into health. Picture lying on a wooden cot while a student of Pythagoras strums a lyre, carefully adjusting strings as if tuning not the instrument, but your very organs. It's equal parts bizarre and beautiful, a reminder that healing has always been as much art as science. And then there's the wilder claim that certain frequencies could literally regenerate tissue. Some fringe theorists today love pointing to 528 Hz, the so-called miracle tone of DNA repair. The evidence for this is thin at best, but you can't deny that the idea of a sound frequency that makes your cells perk up like plants leaning towards sunlight is enticing. Imagine if your phone's ringtone could fix your liver. Okay, maybe not the best use of technology. You'd never survive your email notifications, but the fantasy speaks to a deep human hope that sound might offer painless, invisible repair. Of course, the darker side of sonic medicine lurks too. There are medieval tales of bells rung during plagues, believed to drive sickness from towns with their holy vibrations. Some claim the sound worked, others insisted it did nothing but annoy the rats. Historians still argue whether the practice was mostly symbolic or whether people truly believed the ringing could scramble the disease itself. Either way, when your whole world was collapsing from invisible contagion, the sound of bells might have felt like a thin shield of hope clanging against the silence of death. Step back into the present for a moment, and scientists are actually exploring sound therapy again. Ultrasound is used to break kidney stones into dust. Focused vibrations can promote bone healing. Researchers are experimenting with low-frequency sound to encourage tissue regeneration. What was once dismissed as mysticism is creeping back under the fluorescent lights of modern labs. You picture a white-coated doctor adjusting knobs on a machine, the hum rising in pitch as a patient lies still, bones and cells quietly responding. It's ancient temples reinvented with wires and transducers. You let yourself imagine lying down after a long day, surrounded not by chants or bowls but by a carefully tuned soundscape, deep bass frequencies thrumming through the bed frame, higher tones weaving through the air, your whole body slipping into resonance. You're not in a spa, not in a clinic, but in the quiet theatre of possibility where sound is more than noise. It's a medicine older than language, waiting for rediscovery. And in that thought, you feel a little healed already, just by listening. You shift in your seat, caught between fascination and unease, as your thoughts turn to an even stranger experiment with sound, not the soft hum of bowls or the ringing of temple bells, but sound as a weapon. For as long as humans have wondered if vibration might heal, they've also wondered if it could harm, and sometimes that wondering turned into experiments so unsettling they could have been pulled from the pages of a dystopian novel. Picture the Cold War, when every idea, no matter how outlandish, got funding if it could be twisted into a weapon. Rumours swirled of sonic cannons, devices that blasted low-frequency vibrations capable of disorienting, panicking, or even killing. The science behind it rests on something you've probably experienced. Bass that rattles your ribcage at a concert, or the roar of an engine that seems to sink into your bones. Drop those vibrations to a frequency too low for the ear to register, what scientists call infrasound, and the body still feels it. Some report headaches, nausea, or even terror when exposed. Others dismiss these reactions as the power of suggestion. Still, you imagine standing in front of a massive black box, silent to your ears, yet making your stomach twist and your pulse skip. It feels like standing beside an invisible predator. The brown note myth that a certain frequency could cause people to lose control of their bowels belongs mostly to urban legend, tested and debunked on television. But military documents confirm that acoustic weapons have been researched for real. Sound grenades, directional speakers that beam painful noise straight into ears, even riot control devices that unleash shrieking frequencies to scatter crowds. It's the dark mirror of sound healing. Not harmony, but chaos. Using resonance not to restore, but to overwhelm. Imagine being caught in such a blast, clutching your ears as your chest vibrates. No visible enemy, just the crushing weight of invisible waves. But not all strange experiments with sound veer toward warfare. Some wander into the uncanny valley of the paranormal. In the 1990s, a British engineer named Vic Tandy was working late in a lab where staff kept reporting feelings of dread. Some swore they saw shadowy figures in the corners of their vision. Tandy, curious, discovered that a fan in the room was producing infrasound at around 19 Hz, the same frequency that happens to resonate with the human eyeball. In short, the room itself was vibrating his eyes just enough to create the illusion of movement where none existed. Ghosts, it seemed, could be born from a badly tuned fan blade. The discovery was so striking, it earned the nickname the ghost frequency. You shiver at the thought. Not spirits, not demons, just sound waves tickling your organs in ways evolution never prepared you for. That link between sound and fear raises uncomfortable questions. If infrasound can trick your brain into seeing shadows, how many haunted houses are simply accidents of architecture? How many legends of cursed caves or screaming valleys are nothing more than strange acoustics pressing against your senses? Sound becomes not just a tool of healing or harm, but a sculptor of perception itself, quietly bending reality around you. Yet, the allure of sound doesn't stop with healing or haunting. Researchers even speculate about using vibrations to levitate objects. This isn't fantasy. Acoustic levitation has been demonstrated in labs. Tiny droplets and beads float mid-air, trapped in the invisible lattice of standing sound waves. It's delicate and limited for now, more science fair trick than science fiction dream. But you imagine scaling it up. Objects floating silently through the air, not by magnets or wires, but by the music of physics. The future could look like a symphony of levitating tools, meals drifting weightlessly into place, or even astronauts repairing satellites with vibrating beams of sound. As you sit with all these images, Egyptian healing chants, Cold War sonic weapons, ghost frequencies in dusty labs, you begin to realize that sound is more than something you hear. It's something you feel, something that can heal, frighten, disorient, or even trick your eyes. It is touch without contact, pressure without form, a reminder that the world is stitched together by vibrations too subtle for daily notice. And you think, perhaps the strangest science is not that people tried to weigh the soul, or that they hoped sound might knit bones, but that our bodies are still, even now, instruments played by vibrations we cannot see. Every heartbeat is a drum, every breath a wind note, every bone a tuning fork waiting for the right resonance. The universe hums around you, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, you can almost hear it. The room grows softer, quieter, as though your mind itself is tuning down to those hidden frequencies. You imagine lying there in the dark, listening for the vibrations you cannot quite hear, and the story begins to drift into its gentlest turn toward the role of sound in sleep. For centuries, humans have leaned on lullabies, not just melodies to soothe infants, but rituals of vibration meant to calm the nervous system. A mother's humming, deep and slow, is as much about the resonance in her chest as it is about the tune. Even before birth, fetuses hear the rhythmic thud of the mother's heartbeat, a drum that sets the foundation for comfort. That connection never leaves us. Scientists today have found that slow, repetitive sounds, gentle waves, rain tapping against a window, the soft drone of white noise can nudge the brain into patterns of relaxation, synchronizing with the body's rhythms much the way a tuning fork can set a guitar string humming. Modern research supports what ancient healers seem to know: sound affects sleep. Low, steady tones stimulate the production of alpha brainwaves, the same patterns linked to calm and meditation. Some experiments suggest pink noise, a variant of white noise that emphasizes deeper frequencies, can even improve memory consolidation during sleep, helping the brain process and store information. It makes you wonder, every night you close your eyes, are you not only resting, but also being shaped by the unseen vibrations of your environment? You recall monks in remote monasteries, chanting deep into the night, not just prayer but a form of sonic entrainment, voices overlapping, harmonics layering until the room itself seems to breathe. These chants are measured, paced to slow heart rates and draw minds inward. Listeners often report slipping into trance-like calm, a space somewhere between waking and sleep. Imagine sitting in such a hall, candlelight flickering, stone walls carrying the sound. The chants reverberate in your bones, and slowly your thoughts scatter like dust, replaced by stillness. Yet the effect isn't limited to sacred spaces. Cities hum, too. Every environment has its own soundscape, its own background vibration. Some are harsh, traffic, sirens, neon buzzing, while others soothe, like the rustle of leaves or the steady pulse of waves against a shore. Sound researchers call this the acoustic ecology of a place, the hidden background that shapes mood, stress, even sleep. You wonder if your own restlessness some nights has less to do with your worries and more to do with the vibrations of your environment, pressing against you in ways you cannot name. There's also the uncanny persistence of binaural beats, a modern twist on sonic experimentation. Two slightly different frequencies played into each ear create the illusion of a pulsing third beat. Proponents claim that these beats can enhance focus, reduce anxiety, or guide the brain towards sleep states. The science is mixed. Some studies show mild benefits, others dismiss them as placebo. But the phenomenon itself is remarkable. The brain inventing a rhythm where none exists, caught between two sounds and resolving the tension with its own internal beat. Even in silence, it seems, your brain hungers for rhythm. The deeper truth begins to settle into you. Sound is not merely something outside you, but something that shapes the very machinery of your body. Your brain synchronizes with it. Your organs vibrate to it. Your thoughts bend beneath its pressure. You're not a listener standing apart, but an instrument woven into the orchestra of the world. The science is strange, yes, but also tender. It means you're always in dialogue with your surroundings, always tuned to the hum of existence. And here, in the soft dark of this imagined story, that knowledge becomes comfort, because it means sleep is not something you must force. It is something you can fall into the way you fall into a song, letting the vibrations carry you, letting the patterns settle you, letting the body remember it is part of something larger. Each breath is another note, each heartbeat a soft drum, each moment of stillness another step toward rest. You let the thought linger, your body as an instrument tuned by unseen forces. The hum of the universe itself, once thought of as mystical, now approached by science, becomes the softest cradle. Astronomers speak of cosmic background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, still humming across the heavens. Physicists describe gravitational waves, ripples in space-time itself, stretching and squeezing reality as they pass. Though imperceptible to your senses, these are vibrations too. The cosmos is not silent. It sings in registers you cannot hear. And in that realization, the boundary between science and wonder dissolves. Ancient myths of the music of the spheres, planets moving in silent harmony, now feel less like poetry and more like an intuitive grasp at truth science only later confirmed. Kepler and Pythagoras believed the heavens sang, that celestial bodies resonated in cosmic order. Today, astrophysicists record pulsars, those rapidly spinning stars, emitting radio waves in perfect rhythm. They sound eerily like heartbeats, or like drums in some vast distant temple. What once was speculation is now data, and yet the sense of awe is the same. This is where strange science touches you most intimately, in the act of sleep itself. As you drift between waking and dreaming, your brain's rhythms slow and change. Delta waves, the slowest of all, take over. They are vibrations too, patterns of energy flowing through networks of neurons, syncing and resyncing, guiding your body into restoration. When you dream, another rhythm emerges, rapid and flickering, almost indistinguishable from waking thought. Your mind, even in rest, is never silent. It is always a symphony. You think again of Dr. Duncan MacDougall and his strange, fumbling experiment, trying to weigh the soul by watching numbers on a scale. Perhaps he was measuring the wrong thing. The soul, if it exists, is not something to be captured in ounces and grams, but something you feel in resonance, in the way your heart lifts at a melody, in the way silence after sound can feel full, not empty. Perhaps what he touched was not the soul departing, but the body shifting its last vibration into the universe, a final note dissolving into the song of existence. And so, you lie there, imagining yourself as part of that larger harmony, every cell vibrating faintly, every breath aligning with the rhythms of the earth and sky. The weight of the day slides from your shoulders, like dust falling away, and all that remains is a body listening to itself. You are not alone in the silence. You're surrounded by countless tones, countless frequencies, some audible, some hidden, all of them carrying you gently toward rest. Your eyes grow heavy, the story slows, the vibrations you cannot hear are already working, nudging you toward calm. The world hums quietly, and you hum with it. Let that be enough. You have wandered through strange science, through echoes and experiments, through stories of sound and soul. Now the only task left is to rest, to let your own rhythm join the universal one. Good night. May your sleep be deep, may your dreams be gentle, and may you awaken tomorrow attuned to the quiet music that holds you always.